You're about to spend 6 figures on an ERP system and you can't decide if Oracle NetSuite or Microsoft Dynamics Business Central is the best fit for your company. In this video, I'm going to be comparing these two products back to back, taking a look at their respective strengths and weaknesses. And at the end of this video, I'm going to give you my recommendation on which option you should choose. Welcome back. My name is Chris and I teach people how to use some of the biggest ERPs out there, including Microsoft Dynamics Business Central, Oracle NetSuite, SAP S/4HANA, and for any one of these products, you can do a search of them in YouTube and my tutorials will come up at the top. But in this particular video, I'm not trying to do a deep dive tutorial. Instead, I'm trying to answer a question that I get asked all the time, which is, which product should I go with, Business Central or NetSuite? Those two are most commonly compared to each other, and it's no surprise because they're some of the most popular ERP products and they are very similar. They have so much in common. So really, to start off this video, we should talk about what are the commonalities between these two products and really what are they in the first place. So to start off, they are both cloud-based ERP products, which means that as systems, they exist in the cloud as opposed to an on-premise option. And specifically with NetSuite, you only have cloud as an option, but with Business Central, you do have an on-premise feature. It's just not commonly utilized. So they're both cloud-based ERPs. And if you're not familiar with that term, ERP simply stands for Enterprise Resource Planning, which is a category of software that combines all the major functionalities of a business into one software. So that's everything from accounting and finance, CRM, inventory management, reporting, etc., all in one system. And when looking at ERP software, there's really a tier system in terms of the size of the client that you're dealing with. And specifically for NetSuite and Business Central, they fit into the tier of small to mid-sized businesses. So that is generally companies that make either $5 to $500 million in revenue annually. And it doesn't have to be within that exact range. As you're going to see a little bit later in this video, there are instances where you can get companies making over $1 billion that will end up getting one of these two products, or even are in the pre-revenue stage where they're not even making any money yet, but it's a good fit for them to get either a NetSuite or Business Central product. Another thing these two have in common is they are both software as a service products, meaning you're not just paying one-time fee for the license and you can have it forever. You're going to be paying for these licenses every single year, and the pricing and the fees incorporated with those can change and fluctuate as time goes on. Your contracts can change, etc. Another thing you should keep in mind is that both have a very large partner ecosystem. Unlike some of the smaller ERP products that have just a handful of partners, and when I say partner, I mean consulting companies as well as app developers that make these enhancements or apps that plug into the software. So when it comes to these partner ecosystems, Microsoft unquestionably has the largest partner ecosystem really in the world, but Oracle NetSuite as well. If you go to their convention that happens every year called Suite World, they get 10,000 people show up to that. So we're talking hundreds, if not over 1,000 different partners in that ecosystem that you can choose from. So a lot of different options there. And the last thing I want to point out in terms of a commonality is the fact that neither one is a simple or lightweight implementation. Unlike some of the much smaller ERPs that I'll mention throughout this video, when it comes to Business Central and NetSuite, they generally have robust systems, lots of customizations, which means they're not cheap. And we're talking about, in addition to what you're paying for the software, you're going to be paying for the implementation as well. It's not something that you should ever approach as a do-it-yourself implementation, which some of the other smaller ERPs can be done. Things like Odoo, you can attempt to configure it yourself. You never want to take that approach when you're dealing with Business Central or NetSuite. So those are the things that make them similar, and that's really what these products are in the first place. In the next section, we're going to be taking each one of these products respectively and looking at their various strengths and weaknesses. But before we get into that, I should say that if you want additional one-on-one information on whether one of these products is best for you or maybe an additional ERP system, you can reach out to me. I'll have a link down below and you can schedule a short meeting with me to try to get a better concept of which exact ERP system will be best for you. But if you want a much more high caliber, white glove service in terms of ERP selection, as well as partner selection, and even migration of your data onto what is ultimately going to be your new ERP system, then you should check out the sponsor of this video, which is ERP Advisors Group. I'll have a link for their website down below. They are a top tier consulting company that helps people select a proper ERP and have a successful implementation. So if you're interested in that as a service, check out ERP Advisor Group. But moving on now to the actual strengths and weaknesses comparison, we're going to start off with NetSuite. And when looking at the strengths, I want to make it clear that I'm not talking about NetSuite strengths in relation to any ERP product or even some of the precursors like QuickBooks or Xero. I'm specifically pitting it against Business Central. So for example, when looking at weaknesses for NetSuite, the manufacturing module of NetSuite is not particularly strong, but at the same time, it's also weak in the Business Central system. So that is not something I would bring up because it's not a relative strength or weakness. In these ones, we're really just going to be taking a look at the things that make NetSuite better or worse, and then vice versa on the Business Central side. And starting off with the strengths for NetSuite, NetSuite is the OG cloud native ERP system, meaning long before any of the competitors got involved, NetSuite, even in the late 90s, had a system that was cloud-based. So they have that longevity, that experience. The system's always been made for the cloud. And so in that way, it's just a better system from that standpoint when compared to something like Business Central, which is a newer entrant as a cloud-based ERP software. The next notable strength for NetSuite is the fact that it is highly customizable. Now, it is true that Business Central is also very customizable, but NetSuite has just more options, especially for people who are not developers. I have plenty of videos on YouTube where I show people that are even new to NetSuite and have no programming background. You can go in there and you can customize forms, fields, you can make automated workflows, you can do an enormous amount in the system with just a basic understanding of how it operates. Additionally, when it comes to guardrails and rigidity of the system, in terms of how much you can customize it to fit your exact requirements, while both systems can be customized really to the nines, NetSuite just has more freedom, less rigidity, less guardrails when you're approaching it that way. So that is definitely a strength for NetSuite. Another thing I should point out is when you're looking at NetSuite, and if you know back to its original name, it used to be called NetLedger, and its core strength is financials and accounting. So while Business Central is also quite strong in this area, there's no question that really amongst small to mid-sized ERP products, NetSuite is the king. It just has more functionality, more options, and a stronger, more robust system for accounting than Business Central. At a personal level, they handle financials quite differently. I find that NetSuite has a cleaner approach to accounting than with Business Central, which has a bit of a multi-step accounting approach where you create entries, then you post them. NetSuite just has it as a clean, you create something and all of the postings and that happens in the background. So that is something that NetSuite is very strong on. And when we say accounting, that's a pretty broad category. There's many things that are included in that. Everything from journal entries to transactions and the ledger entries, fixed asset management, all of these various things, they all have their various tool sets. It's just when it comes to the entire subject, NetSuite is very, very strong. And to bring up one aspect in particular, which really I'm going to categorize as its own strength, is the robustness of revenue recognition in NetSuite. So because they have such a strong revenue recognition module in the system, a lot of SaaS-based companies end up going with NetSuite as an option because that's such a core part of their business. Another strength of NetSuite is when dealing with multi-entity or multi-currency companies. So while Business Central can absolutely handle companies that have, let's say, 2 or 3 subsidiaries or a handful of currencies, it has that functionality. But when you're dealing with companies that have 10, 20, 50 or maybe 100 different subsidiaries, that's where NetSuite with their one world system can absolutely shine and does a good job of consolidating all of those different entities. And it's an area where Business Central will start to crack at the foundations because it's really not made to have that many different entities, or if you're dealing with dozens of different currencies, the way that the system handles currencies, revaluations, exchange rates, things like that, it's just not meant for so many different entities or currencies. So that is an area where if you are a larger company, and especially if you're considering you're going to be scaling up to larger quantities, so not just 500 million, but let's say you're going to $1 billion in revenue, that's an area where NetSuite is just a little bit more equipped to handle those sizes, where when you're looking at Business Central, it tends to cap out a little bit more in the $250 million of annual revenue. It's not that you can't go above that, but that's where you start to see bulging at the seams, and Business Central starts to struggle to handle companies that are of that size. And the last strength I want to bring up for NetSuite is they have these industry-specific editions that you can purchase. So if you're in the restaurant or hospitality industry, healthcare, you're a SaaS-based company, e-commerce, manufacturing, no matter what your industry is, NetSuite has these modules that you can purchase that have the system tailored to your specific industry. So you'll still do a lot of customizations in addition to whatever module you select, but when you're looking at Business Central, you just buy the software. You're not going to be buying a specific edition that has those kind of out-of-the-box tailored approaches to particular industries. So those are the strengths. Now let's take a look at NetSuite's weaknesses. And while I wouldn't say it has that many weaknesses, some of them are critically important and may be a deal breaker for you. So the first one, and I would definitely say the major aspect when it comes to NetSuite, is the pricing. When you're looking at ERP software for small to mid-sized companies, generally speaking, not in every case, but most of the time, NetSuite is going to be the most expensive option you have available to you. Now, pricing depends on so many different things, everything from the types of users, the quantity of users, the various modules and features you're gaining access to. So these things can change a lot based not only on the client, but on the system that you're using and many other factors. So while I cannot say that in every case, NetSuite's going to be more expensive, but if you take on average, let's say 4 out of 5 cases, you take the same company purchasing Business Central or purchasing NetSuite, most of the time, NetSuite's going to be more expensive, and in a lot of cases, considerably more expensive. So you should keep in mind that it does come at a higher price tag. Another weakness, in my opinion, is the user interface is a little bit more old school than what you're going to find with Business Central. Now, they are trying to resolve that. They're going to be coming out with a product called NetSuite Next, which is really a major UI overhaul, hopefully in the next year or two, but as of this recording, it has not yet come out. And so you're dealing with a user interface that's just a bit more outdated than what you're dealing with on the Business Central side. Now, moving on to the final weakness, it is the risk of the implementations. Now, both Business Central and NetSuite, as I pointed out earlier, are both difficult implementations, but NetSuite definitely has a higher risk of failure due to several factors. As I pointed out earlier, there is a strength where NetSuite is highly customizable, but at the same time, because it's more customizable and less out of the box plug and play, there is more risk that you're going to customize it incorrectly or not customize it enough to properly fulfill your requirements. Another thing that should come up is because it comes with a higher price tag, not just for the software, but more than likely also for the actual implementation team that's going to be doing the consulting for you, it has a longer timeline, it's more expensive, and when you get more money and longer time, you have a higher likelihood for a failed implementation. So while both are tough, I would say that NetSuite has a higher likelihood on average of getting a botched implementation. So you really need to be particular if you are going to be selecting NetSuite to make sure you choose a proper seasoned implementation team. Another thing I've seen is that because people have so much sticker shock on the licensing software, they tend to undercut or try to find a cheaper implementation option, and that can end up resulting in a failed implementation. So those are the major weaknesses, I would say, when you're looking at NetSuite compared to Business Central. But let's now take a look at Business Central, starting off with the strengths. And there's no question when you're looking at Business Central, the biggest strength is the fact that it is in the Microsoft ecosystem. Just like when you're dealing with Apple, all of their various devices and products all integrate and talk to each other very nicely, and you really feel like when you're in that ecosystem, everything is smooth. It's very similar when you're dealing with Microsoft. If you've got your entire team on Outlook and they're communicating to each other on Teams, everyone uses Word and Excel, you're utilizing all of these different Microsoft products already, especially if you like dealing in that ecosystem, then utilizing Business Central is going to plug into that entire fit of products very well. It also gives you access to a lot of other applications like the Power Apps that you can utilize for things like reporting, automation, etc. So that is a major benefit that you should consider when dealing with Business Central. Now, the next two strengths are things I just mentioned as weaknesses for NetSuite, so I'll just comment on them briefly. The first being the pricing for Business Central. Now, while I would say Business Central is still more expensive than other alternate ERP options like Acumatica, Odoo, Sage Intacct, it still tends to be a much more reasonable pricing structure than when you're dealing with NetSuite. And as well, those implementations have a higher likelihood of being successful. They're a little bit easier when it comes to the customization. There's just not as much customization you're going to be doing, so you can tend to have a shorter timeline. The next strength I want to bring up for Business Central, and this is something I do not hear spoken about very frequently, but I've noticed it personally, is the fact that if you're doing the same exact function in the NetSuite system or in Business Central, for the most part, I'm not going to say in all cases, Business Central tends to execute commands a little bit faster. It has less latency, less lag if you're navigating to different records, opening up reports, creating new records, saving things. It's not that NetSuite is incredibly slow or that Business Central is incredibly fast. I've just noticed that Business Central tends to be a little bit faster as you're cycling through these various functions in the system. And I think that's something that doesn't get commented on very frequently because most professionals don't operate in both systems. People tend to silo and just focus on one system, and so they don't have enough familiarity with both to recognize the fact that Business Central tends to be a little bit faster on most actions that you take in the system. The last thing I want to point out as a strength is the AI functionality. Now, AI is a topic we've been hearing about incessantly for the last 2 years, and every single ERP system is claiming that they are the cutting edge of AI. For the most part, those are not true statements, and for a lot of companies, they simply have not made any real progress forward with AI. And I would put Oracle NetSuite in that category. Now, again, they are coming out with NetSuite Next in the next, let's say, year or two, and they're claiming they're going to bring a lot of new AI capabilities with that upgrade, but that remains to be seen. We're not sure if it's actually going to deliver on all of their promises. As of right now, NetSuite does not have any real AI capabilities to speak of. You can integrate AI capabilities into the system, but their native AI abilities are nothing to speak of. Conversely, when you look at Business Central, now Business Central is obviously Microsoft, and Microsoft has spent billions and billions of dollars over many years building up their Copilot AI feature. And that exists not just in Business Central, but exists in all of their different apps. So that is something where I wouldn't say it's life-changing. It's definitely more helpful and more resourceful amongst the Microsoft products, including Business Central, to improve efficiency and give you a little bit more quality of life features when dealing with that AI than especially when you're dealing with NetSuite. So for people that have a focus on AI, I would say that is definitely a benefit for Business Central. All right, so those are the strengths of Business Central. Now let's take a look at the weaknesses, and none of these will come as a surprise because I've already commented on them earlier in the video. The first one being the fact that if you are a multi-entity or multi-currency company, especially with lots of entities or currencies, then Business Central is going to struggle to fulfill your requirements. It's just not meant to handle that level of multi-subsidiary, multi-currency. Similarly, if you know you're going to be scaling up to a very large organization, even though these small to mid-sized businesses is 5 to 500 million, like I said earlier, Microsoft Dynamics really struggles when you're going above the maybe $250 million range, or at least Business Central does. At that point, Microsoft will try to push you to their top tier ERP product, which used to be referred to as F&O, or Finance and Operations. And I'll talk about that in a later video. But for now, understand that Business Central is just not as scalable as NetSuite is. And then the last thing, which I brought up several times at this point, is just the fact that while you can customize Business Central quite a bit, it doesn't have as many capabilities. It's a bit more rigid. There's more guardrails in terms of what you can do with the system than NetSuite does. So if you know you have a very specific way that you operate your business, it's very unique, or you have certain kind of a special sauce that makes you unique, then trying to have that reflected in the system is going to be more difficult in Business Central than if you're dealing with NetSuite. So those are the strengths and weaknesses of both products. So hopefully that helps you decide which of these two popular ERP products is the best fit for you. Again, if you want some additional consultation on this, you can feel free to reach out to me at my contact link down below. And if you want a full white glove service in terms of ERP selection and implementation, you can check out the ERP Advisors group. I'll have a link for them down below. And ultimately, if you found this video helpful, please hit that like button. I plan on coming out with a lot more of these comparison style videos in addition to my regular tutorials. So if you want to check those out, subscribe to this channel. And with all that in mind, I hope to see you in the next video.